Hi, I'm Curious Cass, and this is Curiosity Junkie. Today we're going to talk about boundaries. What are they and why are they important? Welcome, Tracy Brady, back to the show. Hi, Tracy. Welcome back. How are you?
I am well, Cassie. It's good to see you.
It's great to see you. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us again today. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about, and it's on my list with many, many others, is boundaries. We touched on it in a previous episode, and I noticed in the comments on the Facebook page, someone was saying, I want more on boundaries. And I thought, fantastic, me too. So let's talk about boundaries.
Oh, wow. Well, that's easy. No, yeah, that'll be done in 2 seconds.
You're like,
Thank,
oh, this will be a short video.
thank you so much for inviting me back. I really love these discussions because, like, it's just what I love to do, and I think it really helps people. When people are ready to be helped. Anyway, boundaries is a really important topic, and it's a kind of a catchphrase that's been around for a while. And
Yes.
I think that, first of all, one of the misconceptions I think people have about boundaries is that it's some sort of wall.
Mm.
And, when you think of a lot line or something, your boundary of your home, for example, or your office space or something like that, it's kind of it's not rigid. It's movable. If you need to change it, you can. And so that's something very important, I think, to remember about setting boundaries for yourself. And one of the best ways to think about boundaries is in the physical sense, because it's the easiest way for us to, at least for me, I think, to identify what it means. And so you have physical boundaries, you have emotional boundaries, you have external boundaries and internal boundaries. And as you alluded to in a private conversation we had, you can have boundaries that are different for different situations and different relationships. And that all makes sense. But all of this boundary setting um, is based on listening to yourself and identifying what feels right, what seems right, what hurts, what doesn't, and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I probably, well, for me, I shouldn't speak for everyone. For me, I think it's the the family boundaries, the love relationships. And I guess maybe they are all love relationships because even friends you love and you're always afraid to, like, I am afraid to set that boundary that someone won't accept it, and then, like, there's that fear thing that comes in the mind that says, oh my god, you don't fit in, you're not accepted, that we are afraid to set the boundary that creates a healthier relationship, mostly for yourself and for the other person. So how do you set the boundaries in a loving, because you love that person, but you also love yourself? How do you go about setting a boundary, communicating the boundary, and then how do you maintain that boundary?
Well, I'll start backwards, start with the, the
Good.
last one you said first, and that is maintaining. So boundaries, like I said, are fluid
Right.
and should be fluid based on new information.
Right. Okay.
Okay,
Right.
so it's important not to get uh, dug in.
We're not digging trenches. We're setting
Exactly.
boundaries. Okay.
Yeah, we're not burying ourselves,
Right. Okay.
and so that we can't get out of that. And like you said, boundaries are for ourselves and for our relationship. But one of the biggest barriers, which is why people don't pay a lot of attention to setting boundaries until it's too late, or until they're in a quandary about what to do about something in a relationship or
Right.
a situation, that they just say, oh, maybe something isn't right. And that's a perfect time to notice. When you notice that something's not right,
Mm-hmm.
when you notice that you have a sense or a feeling or even a something hurts,
Mm.
you can say, I mean, there's a reason for that. You
Right.
know, I'm an analogy crazy junkie person, and so I
Oh.
think about something like strawberries.
Mm-hmm.
If you had never tried strawberries and someone says, "I think you should try strawberries," and you might say, "Well, that you check with yourself. Okay, that looks good, or it doesn't look good. That seems right for me, or it doesn't seem right for me." Say you decide it does seem right for you, and you take a bite, and you have one or two, and they taste really good, and you think, "Oh, I'm going to have strawberry." Well, what if you break out in a rash?
Mm.
You have to set a boundary for yourself based on that experience.
Right.
Now, if somebody else comes to you and says, these strawberries are from somewhere else and they don't have that highly allergic reaction for most people, try these. Then you're kind of in a place where you have to say risk benefit.
Mm. Right.
I might be risking, your throat could close up. I mean, like, my nursing background comes into play in a lot of this stuff, which is why I like the physical analogies. But you come to a place where you have to say, what's the benefit? What's the risk? And so that's moving that boundary. And this is a very simple um, way of looking at boundaries, but I think it can be carried forth in mental, emotional, different types of relationships. But the most important thing is to pause and ask yourself, what does this feel like? What does this look like? What will it feel like? If I do get another rash, am I willing to risk it? Um, are the vitamins worth it? What are the benefits? Why do I want to please this person? Is it for me? Is it for them? There's all these things that you can do in a short span. It's not like if you're at a juncture where you are asked to make a decision, either by yourself or your boss or a friend or a lover or child or life. If a question comes to you about something and it causes you to pause for a moment, which almost everything should, except for the stuff that just comes naturally and is fairly safe. And, if it's something like that, the habit of going inside and asking yourself, picturing yourself doing this thing or not doing this thing, picture yourself um, what it would feel like in your body, what the risks would be for yourself, what the benefits might be for yourself, the other person, and try to get an overall picture of what this looks like before you make a decision.
I like that. That's a great one. And I'm such a visual learner that I think that's why I love when you use an analogy, because it just like immediately clicks in my brain and I can visualize it. So it makes perfect sense that that would most likely be a powerful way for me to do those steps, is that visualize what does this look like, and how's this
Right.
going to feel, and what am I committed to, I guess.
That's commitment is really an important word you use there when we're talking about boundaries and self-love, because commitment to self and commitment to others are very important to us. And you mentioned in your introduction the idea of fearing that someone might not accept you, or you might lose the relationship, or they might not love us, or that kind of thing. And that really plays to our survival self,
Yeah.
because if what happens to us if we get picked off, if we get outside the group, outside of the
Right.
comfort and safety of the tribe, we're at risk. We're vulnerable. We really are, but we're not so vulnerable usually that one person getting upset for a minute or two, or even a week or two, is going to threaten our lives. That's usually not the case, but it can feel that way. It can feel very, very threatening. Um, One of the things I like to encourage people to do is to ask themselves, if I disappoint so and so,
Hmm.
or I disappoint myself, put myself in both of those situations. You may think that it would be easier to disappoint yourself, but if you are on a path of being true to yourself, being authentic, and that sort of thing, then generally, if you have to say no to someone else, it's not going to it's not going to push someone away who needs to be in your life and who is good for you.
Right.
Even our children, which is a big hot topic for people, especially now that we're, you know,
Spending lots
on a,
of quality time together.
I know, you know, I talk about, couples and that sort of thing, but our children, first of all, you know, so many people are so used to having their children be cared for and taught outside the home, which has been wonderful. But it's not left a lot of room for developing healthy boundaries around our children. And so, unfortunately, there has been, a lot of people having to learn this the hard way, and children having to learn it the hard way with the difficulty in controlling emotions and self-regulation,
Yeah.
and some abuse has occurred. And so it's really important for parents to understand that it doesn't mean you don't love your child to take some time.
Yes. Yes.
It's also showing your children, that they too deserve and have a right to take time for themselves.
Mhm.
So having the idea of your own space. Not a lot of people, not everyone has their own room in their home,
Mhm.
but maybe you can have your own space in your room for your things, or maybe you can negotiate with your siblings a time where you each have your own time in your room, because other people and other relationships are a bit of a distraction for us to get to pay attention to what's going on inside ourselves and get that imagination going and get to try to think about what's important to me and what does this COVID thing mean to me and what about school and what do I want to draw. And you know if somebody else is right there, it's a bit of a distraction. It's hard for most people to tune that out completely, because we do not want to offend. Usually we do not want to, and that's how fights can start and stuff, because they're not taking these times for
Mhm.
themselves. It's just really important for parents to encourage that for their children, and one of the ways to encourage it is to do it for yourself.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
that's setting a boundary, and it doesn't mean that, say you and I are siblings and we share a room and we negotiate some time where I have, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you have Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday from 3 to 5, and that's our times in our room.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm ill or you have a friend over or something, that's a boundary that we can negotiate,
Yeah.
and it just is so much. It feels scary. It feels like I'm being selfish or something. It feels like, but the benefit is, if you think about it, is so much better than the risk, because we're going to end up, our souls, our spirits are going to call out to us and say, "Hey, you're eating a bad strawberry. I told you, the first time with that rash that you should be doing that. And here you are on the fourth strawberry from the fourth country, and the rash is getting worse and worse. And last time you were in the hospital
What
for
are
a
you doing?
day or had to have shots or something crazy. It's it's almost like we don't know we need to set a boundary until our senses tell us that we do.
Right. That makes perfect sense. And so when you get to that point and you're at the you've processed it, you're realizing that this isn't this doesn't feel good. This isn't good for either party. How do you go about setting that boundary?
Like with another person.
Mhm.
Well, suppose, would you like to give me a scenario?
Yeah, okay, let's just go to family because I think most that's probably the most detrimental to not have some healthy boundaries. And that's when relationships get kind of weird. So, how do you set boundaries with family members for not just wanting to be in your business or that unsolicited advice that comes at you? Because I think that's in every family. It's a love thing. They care about you, so they feel like they know what's best for you and they want to tell you what's best for you. And I'm not talking about my family or anything, but I'm just curious, like, what? This is for a friend.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that friend because it's me too.
Right? I think every family is like that. We love and care, and I do it too. It's unsolicited love in the form of advice and expectations, which we talked about, and that kind of thing. So, how do we do it in a healthy way that is a, because I think it's a conversation, and it's those are difficult conversations to have when you
Right.
haven't had them before. You're not used to having them. So, how do you start that conversation in a loving, from the heart way?
Well, I think the first thing to do is to ask yourself, I would ask myself, well, what does this mean to me that this person is, we'll just say, habitually providing unsolicited advice on something that they know nothing about, really, only surface wise. And, if it's somebody that is a family member, I'm going to assume that they care about me.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, they only want what's best for me, but they don't necessarily know all the ins and outs that go into that, and nor did I ask them for that. I have to ask myself first, am I providing some sort of unspoken invitation for advice?
Okay.
Am I going on and on about things? Am I, say it's um, maybe I'm 30 years old and I'm not married or something. So, or 35 or 40 or 50 or whatever. And I think that I'm supposed to be married. Okay. So I go on and on to my mother or my sister or my friend or, my whoever, my neighbor about this stuff because we're friends and we talk about stuff like this. Well, that may be an invitation that I'm not aware of to, well, why don't you get on eHarmony, or why do you care about being married? That's so old school, or who knows what they might say. And of course I have probably thought about all these things and I'm just venting, but at the same time when I hear these things it's hurtful, because when we speak it kind of like it's in us and then we get to hear it, so that means it really was in us, but we don't really want to know what other people think about that because that is coming from their experience. There's very few people in our lives usually that we can respect to a level that we really value their opinion and know that they have our best interest at heart.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not always people that are close to us because they have a stake in what we do and what we think of them. So, not wanting to offend and that sort of thing, you come to a place where you have to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily always have to be a long, drawn out conversation, right?
Right.
It can be a process of building a boundary. I was going to say brick, but stick by stick, thin stick by thin stick. It's kind of like you have to decide, is this a firm, firm, firm boundary that's going to protect me physically? Is someone harming me, and I have to, really not even have this person in my life anymore because they actually harm me? That's a pretty thick brick boundary. But if
Right.
you're talking about this, with a conversation and unsolicited advice, you can, number one, ask yourself, is this the person that I really should be venting to about this anymore? It obviously triggers them in a way that is hurtful to them, and maybe they're very affected by my emotions, and I'm very upset about this. And so when I share this stuff with them, they get kind of triggered. I hate these catchwords, but they get triggered. Oh gosh, I can't have Tracy upset, so I've got to try to fix it.
Yeah.
because it makes them upset to have me upset or something. So, they may have a vested interest in their own emotions about my emotions. I know it's kind of convoluted.
No, but that makes sense because, like I was saying in another video, my emotions are cry or become defensive. So if someone were having that conversation, I always just think of like if I were on the other side of this and someone were having that conversation with me, I would either become defensive or do that cry thing in response to that conversation. I mean, I could see that happening. I'm getting it in check. But I know what my reactions tend to be. So I get that they would have possibly a reaction.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
And, we're always trying to manage other people's emotions, whether even when we don't realize it, because we don't want to feel guilty. We don't want to feel like we have done something to hurt somebody, or we want to put them in a position to approve of us or like us or stay in our lives or come for Christmas or put up the dishes or whatever. So we're always, we're always kind of manipulating and controlling without knowing it, without really being consciously aware of that. But back to your question, you can say something depending on this relationship. You can say something like, I know I have really been going on and on about this for a while, and I am just kind of done talking about it for now, or I'm over myself, I'm over it for now, and see if that helps. And if it doesn't, and if they continue to try to provide solicit advice, you can always change the subject. You can always, if you're on the phone or you're talking socially distant, proper social distance, you can always, have something that you need to go do. You can step away from that, and taking charge of your own emotions and your own responses from people is something that's very empowering.
mm-hmm.
And we can do it in a kind way most of the time, and most people will get it. It's not that they will get the idea that you're not liking them or not what they'll put the two and two together. That every time I talk about eHarmony with Cassie or with Tracy, she gets weird and goes away. And if they value that friendship, then they will respect that boundary.
Right.
If it doesn't, go against their boundary or something like that. So it's always, that's why it's got to be so fluid. It's new information, new emotions, new feelings, new facts. If you're in touch with what's going on with yourself, if you can ask yourself how I feel about this, is this important to me? What is the risk benefit? And also notice something doesn't feel right. What is that? Oh, I don't like the way they hold my hand and squeeze really hard. You know, that may be something somebody does that's the way they show love or something. But in your family, maybe it didn't feel right. You've set a boundary that says I'm not going to be hurt anymore. That feels hurting to you. Yeah, you might risk them not wanting to hold your hand anymore,
Right.
but you can do it in a way that says, for me, this is not what feels comfortable for me. It actually brings up some stuff depending on how close you are and how comfortable you are being vulnerable with this person. You can tell how much depth you can share how much depth you want about what's behind this boundary setting. We are always in flux.
Mm.
And if somebody's just getting started and wants to kind of get a little bit more order in their life and feel a little more empowered and see what's really true, I would encourage maybe a values list. What's important to me? Child welfare, a political party, a color blue, the ocean, clean water, whatever. Just make some decisions about what really is important to you, because that is all individual. Everybody's got their own. Not everybody likes oatmeal cookies with raisins. It's different. And it's okay to know what those are. And once you know what those are for yourself, you can make better decisions about what makes you feel right and good. And
I like that. I like that. And you and I both have done and do vision boards or a vision journal, whatever someone might want to mess with, might even be a great place to work on that when you're doing that every 6 months or once a year, or whenever you might do yours, or if you journal, like just find this a spot to really think about that, because I have done that before with the values, and it is pretty powerful. It's enlightening, and you can kind of prioritize, I don't want to say your life, but maybe the direction you're wanting to move forward with everything around you. Yeah, I love that. And again, I just want to take a quick second to reintroduce Tracy Brady to the show. Do you feel like boundaries, is it okay to have some unspoken boundaries? Like those are boundaries for yourself? And do all boundaries have to have a verbal, hey world, this is my boundary and for today and in this moment? Or is it not super necessary to worry about?
I just got a visual of, when uh, when I would make a decision about something that was really important, like, yeah, by golly, it's almost like I have to go around, with a poster board screaming it, nobody mess with this, I'm in charge now. And
This is my boundary.
like, it's like, and it does feel really good when you empower yourself. It really does. But you mentioned internal boundaries, and they're all internal boundaries, and not all of them have to be spoken, nor should they be.
Right.
One of the things about if you ever decide that you're going to quit smoking, for example, or you're not that you smoke, but or you're going to quit cussing, or you're going to start exercising. You make this boundary, this commitment to yourself or something, and then God forbid you tell some people, they're going to be on you. Oh,
Right.
you smell like smoke. I thought you quit. Oh my God, I wish I had never told you.
Yes.
So, and that's true. Some of these things we need to keep inside. We need to, it's a barrier between us and others that says, this is where you start and I stop. Mm-hmm. And certain people, here's a circle around my head, and right here may be where I let some people get, but I may keep other people here, right, outside the circle, and I may occasionally bring somebody in right here, but it just depends on the level of trust, right? And so not everything has to be spoken, right? Now, when we talk about emotional, mental, internal boundaries, these are things that what I think about is something like allowing myself to go to a place of sadness. I can go, in my life, I have gone to the bottom, and luckily I'm alive. But I have recognized over time that I cannot let myself go so far. I have to bring it back. And so I notice when I get sad about stuff, I'm a very intense person, and I feel things strongly. I'm very deep. And anyway, I love that about myself. But at the same time, I have to almost protect myself from myself. And I have to set a boundary about that. I have a tendency to, what did you say you do? You either cry or get angry.
Defensive.
Defensive.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that makes sense to me because as soon as I start feeling vulnerable, I want to cry. Or as soon as I start feeling frustrated or angry, I go to cry. And I'm pretty sure that's just the coping skill I used when I was growing up. But now, if I'm having an intimacy growth period with my partner or with my daughter or my mother or a friend, the last thing I want to do is cry all the time.
Right.
It's like So I kind of, everybody says be true to yourself. Well, is crying all the time being true to me? It's not.
Right.
It's allowing myself. It's almost like allowing a 5-year-old to have all the candy they want.
Yeah.
I have to kind of fetch myself up sharply and have a little bit of loving parent come in there and say, here's where we draw the line
Mm-hmm.
for your benefit and for the benefit of your future with these relationships and all that kind of thing. So I know that's just one example, but if there's something that is really getting somebody, internally, they go to this place a lot, place, um, if there are a lot of triggers of watching the news, it's just become, habitual, and because I know a lot of people that are doing that now, and it's not easy to self-regulate your emotions when it's very triggering, with COVID and policy and election, and the divisiveness that you may or may not be aware of in your mind or not see or see. But any of these things can be, anything actually can be a good school for your internal teacher and parent to say, how is the class doing today? Maybe we don't need to do too much more on World War II, because half the kids are crying, or you know they're dreaming about blood and guts at night or something. I mean, I know that's a weird analogy, but we have to pay attention to what's going on inside of us in order to self-regulate and manage, because like I said, the brain's going to go overthink, do crazy stuff, remember, try to figure out, try to defend, and sometimes it's overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also why it's good to have a list of things that bring you joy.
Yeah.
And so you can go to one of those. Just go look. I'm gonna take a break from all this. I'm gonna go do something that brings me joy. That's a boundary.
I like it. I like it. That just made me think of something I read, that somebody basically made that list of things that bring them joy and tore them off, put them in a bowl, and every time they would sit down to have breakfast, they would read one of those. And it was either like fun memories, just joyful things. So anything and everything that brought them joy, whether it was a memory or something they wanted to do or a word or a song, they threw it in there and they read that, and that started their day. They would read that as they were having breakfast, and I thought, what a great thing! Like just a reminder to be joyful. I
Well,
like that.
what you make me think of something, that another boundary I had to set for myself. I have a whiteboard, and just to give you a little history, I can do graph paper with goals separated by how they're measured by day, by time. Oh my God, I did that for a couple of years, and it was helpful, but it got to be a lot of pressure. And so recently, I put on my whiteboard, stop trying.
Oh, wow! I love
And it's
that.
in the back of my mind. It's kind of simmering down there. And, it doesn't mean stop trying. It means stop trying so hard, because that I know myself, and I can put the pressure on.
Yeah.
And I don't like the way that feels all the time. You know, um, I had a client who enjoyed swimming, and they had a lot of pressure and rushed a lot of things and felt a lot of need to complete tasks in a very kind of hurried way, and was a lot of anxiety. And so we worked through all that, and decided that maybe for them, they could approach their tasks like they approached swimming,
Ah,
and with the flow and the arms, and just because that was something that they really felt true to themselves in and felt relaxed. And so if you have something like that, if it's fishing or swimming or baking or bird watching or coloring or whatever it might be, if you can approach some of these other issues or tasks in your life with that sense. Just bring that with you into the, you can spread out your, you can increase your enjoyment and decrease your anxiety a little bit.
Right.
But those are some of the ways that we can pay attention to our own boundaries for ourselves.
I
Right.
did want to get into how do we, like, my kids are grown, but for those out there with small children who are possibly just learning to set boundaries, so they're not skilled at it, they're figuring it out, but it's important to them to teach their children to set healthy boundaries. What steps could someone take to kind of work with children in setting boundaries?
Well, the first thing that I like to encourage parents to do is to ask themselves if they are being a good example, if they like the way they're setting a boundary,
Mm-hmm.
setting their own boundaries, if they are comfortable and happy and have a process whereby they pay attention to how they feel, they check in with themselves, they know when their breathing is shallow, they know when something feels weird in their gut. If they know how to do that, they can teach their children how to do that
Nice. I
at
like.
an age appropriate level, of course. Even small children can, you can ask them at 2 or 3 years old, does it hurt in your tummy? Does it feel good when, doesn't that feel good when you touch a puppy softly? That's sweet. You can reflect back to your children with your words and your energy and your emotion and your facial expressions. This is how they learn.
Yeah.
This is what feels good, kindness, gentleness. It's just mostly about being good examples because children will do what you do, not what you say necessarily.
Absolutely. Right.
They emulate.
Yes.
We emulate our parents without realizing that we're doing it until we're like, oh God, I never wanted to do that thing that my parent did. And here I am doing it. Oh my gosh.
I've become my mother.
Well, yeah, and most of the time that's fantastic. But
Absolutely.
we
Yeah.
don't have perfect parents.
And
They
we are
didn't
not
get the
perfect.
manual. They weren't taught how to do this by their parents for the most part.
Yeah.
We're very fortunate we live in a very enlightened and enlightening time right now where we can pay attention to these things and increase our, or at least minimize our suffering a little bit more.
Right. No, that's wonderful. So I'm going to say thank you so much, Tracy, for this. Again, this was Tracy Brady. She joined today to talk about boundaries. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and continuing to come on and for being my friend. I greatly appreciate it. And to all of you, thank you so much for tuning in, listening, watching, however you're doing your thing. And stay curious, my friend. Stay curious.